So let's get into some of the more serious stuff. Where did you grow up, my dude?
I grew up in Brownwood, Texas. It's about Central Texas, over close to Abilene. And right now, shoot, I'm living in Waco. But I was born in Corsicana, Texas. And I think I was just born, and then they brought me to Brownwood.
Corsicana is East Texas. It's down there, kind of near
Yep.
Palestine, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have
Yes,
roots
sir.
here. I'm in Wood County, Texas, which is kind of north of Tyler. So I'm in East Texas
Okay.
myself. Yeah. So I feel like the influences always make up the artist, right? So whether it's life
Mm-hmm.
influences, musical influences, whatever it is, I always love to talk about the beginning of an artist, almost their immersion into music. So who were some of your first musical influences when you first started delving into music?
So both of my parents were both vocalists, so they play a huge part in not only just like my inspiration, but also the makeup of my voice itself. As for like Main Street artists, there's Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, James Taylor, Kirk Franklin and his choir, you know, just all over the place. A couple of French artists that I don't understand what they're saying, but it sound good. So
That's what's up. So there's some phenomenal songwriters there: Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder, James Taylor. Man, you were on to the songwriters at a young age, huh?
yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Because it's one thing to be turned on
I
to an artist, but it's quite another to be turned on to a singer songwriter. And you just named some really heavy duty singer songwriters, which is interesting, knowing where you ended up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
So
sure, for sure.
you did lose. You mentioned your parents. You lost your parents at an early age, and I know that still they still have quite a big role, not only in your life but obviously in your music too. In fact, the second song you're going to play later on in the show is kind of a testament to what we're going to talk about here. So tell me
Mhm.
what role your parents had and still have, both in your life and in your music.
So I'm a huge mama's boy. I'm a huge mama's boy. My mom, she was in a lot of like plays and musicals, and so I got to watch that as I grew up. And I ended up doing musicals myself. Both her and my dad both performed. So like in Brownwood, they were like, okay, we're having this event. Let's have the Webbs come out and sing something. So we get to go. I used to go out and see my parents, be somewhat idolized in the musical community of Brownwood, and to see them make positive change in the community, just to be a part of all these different events and being able to say, okay, we're certain folks in this place. Now, my dad, he was in and out of my life, which that made me hard in a sense and have to grow up quickly and all that good stuff. But I
Mm-hmm.
never take away from the good that my dad has given me. I when my parents split, weirdly enough, like they would still go to karaoke and they'd both sing the same song. But like with my dad, I'd sing my mom's part, and with my mom, I'd sing my dad's part. And so that stretched my range out. So that's where like all the extra highs and extra lows come from. As of now, I get told that I'm a lot like my dad, and I'm a lot like my mom all the time, where it comes to how hard I care and how hard I work and how much I forgive and how easily I can forgive.
And there is a lot of optimism and joy in what you do as an artist, and I can't wait to really delve into that because it's so noticeable, from somebody like myself who's kind of on the outside looking in. I really want to try to kind of own in on where your joy comes from, but that's going to be a little bit later. Now, having lost
All
your
right.
parents at such a young age, you just kind of mentioned this in passing. That probably forced you to have to grow up at a more increased pace. What kind of effect do you think
Yes, sir.
that had on your music? Now, obviously, if you're the man of the house at a really young age, that's going to speed up your maturation process just in a life sense. But what did it do to your music
Right.
later on?
I think like what it did for my career, like as if I've talked about it like as of right now, it made it to where I don't have as many excuses as a lot of artists that are my age. you hear a lot of musicians that quit because of how hard it seems, and not getting the oh man, you did a great job, man, that's great, that's great. They get that first little criticism or beat down from the world, and they're like, well, you know what, man, I could do without this ain't gonna work for me, and they quit, but my first real show was a 4-hour drive, 104 degrees, and my car kept stopping because the radiator was bad and the tires blew. And so it was like, you can't have excuses if you really want to make it in this game, because I'm like, man, I still figured out how to pay my bills. And even when I couldn't pay my bills, I still figured out how to eat and how to drink and how to go to school and finish high school and do all those things without having what everybody else had in their homes.
Yeah, and I imagine that's something you had to learn at a young age too, because your parents were in that game, and around Brownwood, and so you probably saw that struggle firsthand too, like just them being part of the music business around there. I imagine that probably had a big effect on knowing, or not knowing, but just not letting yourself quit. You know what I mean? And I,
Right,
I love
right.
that.
And I think it's And I think it's because, my parents didn't really fully step into their musical. Well, I mean, maybe they did step fully into their musical calling. That's between them and God. But, my mom was a principal and my dad was a counselor. They never fully said, you know what, I'm gonna jump full time
Right.
into being a musician and see where this goes. And so for me, that's a motivation for me too, because I'm like, my parents did a lot of great things, but if they didn't do this one thing, I'm gonna do it so I can share the legacy that they should have.
That's amazing, man. I love that. And man, I dig your vibe so much too. And like the song we played earlier in the show is just a small microcosm of who you are musically. And I want to talk about that so much. You have so many different styles, genres, whatever you want to call it within your craft. But you yourself have called it Americana Soul. And so this
Yeah.
this is the first time I've ever heard this concept kind of put that way. So what does Americana Soul mean to you? Like what does that mean?
So Americana to me means melting pot, right? So it's like it's a whole bunch of different genres, put together, a whole bunch of everybody that couldn't get put in the country, couldn't get put into pop, couldn't get put into gospel, all those different things. That's what I am. But it's soul because that's where everything is rooted from. I began in soul. I began in church. I began, with Stevie Wonder and the Commodores and the Spinners and all that good stuff. So my whole bottom foundation is soul, but it meshes into this melting pot of whatever I'm creating that can be used in any other genre you spin it in.
Yeah.
So I just call it Americana Soul.
And guys, if you decide from listening to this or watching this episode to go down the wormhole that is Zak Webb's music, man, you guys are gonna love it. It's so all over the place. It's what I call polyjamorous, right? Because you got blues, you got
Yeah.
jazz, you got country, you got this and folk, and there's just so much, so many layers into what Zach does, and it's so awesome. Another thing I noticed about you, I've never been to one of your shows, but I've watched a lot of video on you for the last couple of weeks since I knew this interview was happening. You seem to have a really special connection with your audiences that really kind of go beyond the typical fan and artist dynamic that I see typically. So
Mhm.
why is that audience connection so important to you, and how do you cultivate that?
I think it's from like when I first began, and it was like I would play and there was like maybe three or five, three, 7, 10 people maybe. And it was always kind of small crowds, but it was like I want these folks to feel like they're having a great time, regardless of how small the crowd is, because I don't want them to even think that I'm disappointed because I'm not. I'm here sharing something with you that's important. And also, when it came to just getting bigger and bigger, I was like, well, now I just got more people that I want to have a good time. And, I talked with one of my bandmates and I said, hey, and he said, are you one of those guys who says, hey, I perform for the 10 like I do the 10,000, or I perform to the 10,000 like I perform to the 10? And I said, well, yeah, I perform to the 10,000 like I perform to the 10, not the 10 like the 10,000, because I want even all those 10,000 people to feel like they're in a personal meeting with me. And if this song is for you, I want you to feel every piece of it. You know, and the way that I do that on stage is, you know, there's a lot of shows where everybody doesn't pay attention. Some people, they always got folks on their phone,
Right.
people in the conversation. But those folks that know, hey, this right here is for me, they tune in. And I look them in their face and I say, hey, this one's for you, me and you know. And it helps them either I'm singing about something they know, like I'm singing one of these covers that they know and they're just enjoying it. I'm singing a song that I wrote that they relate to and that they're like, oh, I'm going through this same thing right now. Or I'm singing a song that's about hope and change. And it's like, okay, I may be feeling this right now, but I won't be feeling this sooner or later.
Right, and that I feel like that connection to an audience member one by one is so important to an artist too, because I mean those people could do anything with their time and money that day. They chose you for whatever amount of time that they choose to be in that establishment. They could be at Jalapeno Tree, or they could be watching YouTube at home, but they're there for you.
Right.
And so, like, I've been streaming video games live for a really long time. I've streamed to 1,000 people, and I've streamed to 5 people. And I mean, those 5 people chose to watch me play video games that day. So I focus on those 5 people like they are the 1,000. And so that's essentially what you're talking about. And that's the best way to look at it, to be honest.